Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 124 of Discourse in Magic with David Peck. Now, this was a very exciting episode for me because David Peck's podcast was one that I listened a ton to in the beginning journey stages of building this podcast. As a matter of fact, there was some people that I listened to his interviews with to get a good, exciting feeling for how to interview and different amazing questions to ask certain people. So David is a really good interviewer as well as an amazing interviewee because he talks about some exciting topics, one of which is using magic to raise money for charity. And in an overarching idea, we talk a lot about just the different ways that you can use magic. I know not everyone listening to this is a full-time magician, but at Discourse in Magic, we encourage you to use your magic. Don't just be a secret magician in your bedroom. Find some way to use your magic. So we talk a lot about that, and I think you're going to love the episode. So here it is, episode 124 with David Peck. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very special guest. This is one of the few people whose podcast I listen to about, at sometimes magic, which helped me helped me want to have a podcast in magic. It's part of the reason why this is here. And I've heard only the best things about his performing and his speaking from close friends, people like Matt DeZero, who you've heard on the podcast. And I'm just super excited to talk to him about all of the different projects that he's been doing, is doing, and has done. We are here with David Peck. David, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Jonah, Tyler, thanks for having me on today. Really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Super pumped to have you on. And, it's always super surreal when, people come up to me sometimes and they're like, magicians, and they're like, I've been listening to your podcast now for 3 weeks, multiple episodes a day, and I've been binging your voice. And to me, I'm like, that's crazy that you would listen to multiple hours of me. But it's so surreal. I know, like, I can see it in their eyes, them hearing me talk for real, So part of it's always interesting to hear someone who you've heard podcasting for many years live and in the flesh,
Yes.
There's always something weird about that. So very nice to have you on, and excited to start at the beginning with you and ask, how did you get into magic? I know you've sort of really evolved and changed and twisted and turned the stuff that you've done. But let's start at the beginning. How did you get into magic? How's magic a part of your life?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. That's going to take some time, right? I've always had kind of a love, I suppose, for that moment, the wonder. But really, I think for me, it started. I was about 5 or 6. I was in a church basement. That magic show that we've all done and where we've all been at some point in our careers and in our lives. And I watched this woman who was dressed in a rabbit suit. She was assisting a clown magician. So take it from there, right? The level of theater, right? But I remember, Jonah, Tyler, the moment that she tore this piece of paper up, she put it in her mouth, and out came this colorful coil of linked paper that was hundreds of feet long, right? And as a 5-year-old, I was just stunned. And I mean, honestly, I think from that moment, the seed was planted, and I've often thought about that. I've referred back to it. I still use that prop, that bit in many of the performances I do, and sometimes just as a way to explain something to get from one place to another. So that was it. I was about 5 or 6. And then a friend of the family, a guy that we called Uncle Cliff, who wasn't an uncle, showed me my first magic trick, 97 Staveley Crescent in Toronto. And it was the Professor's Nightmare with string. And it was impossible to do. Can you imagine doing that with string?
Impossible.
And from there, I was about the age of 8, and my mom and my dad got me a magic set, and I ended up going to believe it or not, I'm old enough to have visited the Arcade Magic Store in Toronto. And I don't even know if you guys know what that is.
The Arcade Magic Store?
The Arcade Magic Store,
Let me tell you something. We've had this podcast now for over 2.5 years, interviewed a lot of people from Toronto. I have never heard of that in my entire life. I've lived in Toronto. Tyler, have you ever heard of the Arcade Magic Store?
No, but it sounds like the coolest thing
Yeah, never
existed.
heard of
Oh,
that
come
in my
on,
entire
guys!
life.
I guess I now sound to your listeners like I'm about 83. But,
No, not at all. But I'm just saying, like, we've had like a lot of people, a lot of Toronto legends on, and people mention, and we're going to talk about it, like Harper's and
right.
and I remember Morrissey's. I went a few times.
Of course.
But whatever you're talking about now, I never heard of in my life.
Our arcade. So I was in.
Where
I
was
was
that?
So it was right at. And I'm going to get this wrong, but I'm going to say about between Yonge and King and Yonge and Queen, and it was on the east side. It was a building. It's probably a condo now, or a theater or something like that. But in this little mini mall, there was a stamp shop in there, and there was the great shoe store, and there was a flower shop and a cleaner, and there was the arcade magic, and I think novelty shop. I'd have to look that up. And Harry and Sophie Smith. And so I went. I mean, Houdini had been in the store, right? I mean, this was a store that was it was remarkable. And I remember going in the first time. And it's interesting you bring up Morrissey. Not only was her a dear friend, but I worked at the store for years. And one of the first things I saw when I went into the store was a chop cup. And it was a large one, and it was silver, and there was this red bag, and it was $17, which was an outrageous amount of money to me, at 9 years old. Yeah. And I wanted to know what it was, and Sophie wouldn't show me. Because she said, that's for a magician who kind of understands. That's for a magician who's done some of the hard work. Let me show you something that I think might be a little more appropriate for you. Now that's my paraphrase, but she then went on to sell me, a penetration frame and a thing called Zip Zip. Right. Some of your listeners will know, and the plastic cups and balls eventually came out. But she had this sense about her, and she had enough. Sense of mystery and reverence for the craft that she said, there's certain things you need to know before you go there, if that makes sense. So, right. Wooden floors, you knew this place had history when you walked in the doors. And it's, I spent a lot of time in magic stores over the years, and I made a lot of great friends. I met a lot of weird people too, right? But had some amazing, like 6 and 7 and 8 hour sessions at a magic store on a Saturday, from a Saturday morning to a Saturday afternoon. Wonderful stuff, right? Formative years. So I'd love to know if there are photos of this store, but it was one of those little narrow shops, not a lot of real estate, but I would go into Toronto a couple times a year with my mom on the subway. We lived in, just outside of the core of the suburbs, and would have this wonderful time and come home with 1 or 2 tricks. The first tricks I actually got were through the mail, back of a comic book, finger chopper and a coin slide. And Mystic Smoke. How crazy is that?
Oh, no.
Oh,
wow. Not Mystic Smoke.
Exactly. And you want to know a classic? I'm going to take a photo of it, and I'm going to send it to you later. I still have the original. That's over 40.
Wow.
I'm 52, guys. That's 43 years old.
Wow. I'm sure it still smells just as bad. And
it still works, believe it or not.
I can imagine.
No expiry date on the tube either.
That's just because it comes pre-expired.
It does. It comes pre-expired.
Yeah, no doubt, eh? Like a lot of magic these days.
Yeah. There's a few things that catch my attention about your story. The first is that I love that you painted the picture of who the person was doing it and how I almost want to just say strange the whole situation was that would be what fooled you, and whatever you said, the basement of a church, the assistant putting paper in her mouth, like, definitely not the highest end of magic tricks that one could stumble upon. But what that highlights for me is that you are obviously somebody who cares and thinks about the analytic nature of it all and has for a long time. So that, you didn't get into magic because of the flashy lights. You got into magic because you just couldn't sleep after where could that paper could have come from, right? That missing bit of knowledge is what propelled you in. So
this was I had just seen a miracle.
This feeling, I have this little tiny feeling sometimes that people get into magic. And that's why I ask about the moment that people get into magic, because I feel a lot of people, they were destined for it. Like it just the first time that you saw it, because a lot of people that are into magic, they're like, the first time that I saw this magic, I knew that I had to do this. It wasn't the second time. It wasn't the 9th time, the first time that they saw it, they're like, I have to figure all of this out, and not everyone feels that way. So something tells me you were destined for this.
Well, I think it's interesting that you say it that way. I mean, it brings up a pretty interesting philosophical conversation about freedom and choice and determinism and stuff. But it is 100% in my blood. I mean, I don't, and I'm sure we're going to get into this in our conversation today. I don't do a lot of performing for the real world anymore. I might do 2 or 3 sort of paid gigs a year now, but I use it in a lot of ways in speaking and so on in a very practical way. But there isn't a day, guys, that goes by that I don't have a pack of cards in my hands.
Oh, really?
I'm not joking.
That's
like it is a part of my daily routine, and I don't really feel comfortable without a coin in my pocket. So
wow,
it's also interesting to me that your comment there, John. I think for me the magic has not always been tied to necessarily the effect, but I think it's how it lives after.
Totally.
Right? What is it? The legend grows.
What you said there. Wow. I love what you just said there. The legend grows. Like
Yeah.
it does.
And it gets bigger. And it's like, did David Copperfield vanish a Learjet or was it a jumbo jet? Was it the Statue of Liberty or was it the Eiffel Tower? Well, so I think there's a lesson to be learned there, but I guess my point to some degree is that it really did get into my blood,
but that's something super to think about. We forget. It's so hard to remember what it's like to be a layperson, and remembering the idea that like, screw it, even if just 1% of your entire audience ever sort of has that moment that we're talking about, that legend grows where they don't sleep about it or it infects them,
it's a good way to think about it.
We have to keep in mind that we're infecting some people and how and what that sort of what that entails and what that means for what we're doing. So I love that idea of the legend grows. Let's keep going from there. So from you started into magic, you were hooked on it, and then now you use it sort of as a tool. So what was that transition like? Tell me about your journey. I know you did a little bit of magic professionally, and then what was that whole journey like? And then where did it take you towards now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I mean, I kind of started out as the kids performer, as that sort of birthday magician, doing a lot. I remember Christmas seasons having, I think the most I ever had was 6 gigs in one day, and it was insane. And I was late for a gig and they put me on after Santa Claus because there was a snowstorm, and wow, did I learn a lot of lessons that day,
Yeah.
But so I had kind of that natural progression, but I was a part of a really wonderful community. I remember seeing Jay Sankey lecture, and I think he was 19 or 20 at the time, and he and I didn't become friends till years later, and we were working a gig together. But I guess my point is that if there was any advice I could give, and I hope we kind of talk a little bit around some of that stuff, but it would be to become a part of a community somewhere, online, face to face, local magic club, start a group yourself, hang out with other magicians and be intentional about it. And anyway, that was something that's kind of something I really miss too. I think today is that you just hanging out around a meal, talking stories, reminiscing a little bit, but also talking about ideas and subtleties. Right. And you guys are in the middle of it all. You get that, right? But there's something really romantic and charming, and I think really meaningful about that kind of community. So for me, that was a really important part of it. And then I started to do the close-up thing, and for sure I predate DVD and videotape and so on. So I have some books that were just central to who I am today as a magician. But then people like David Ben and Herb Morrissey. I met David Ben when I was 16, and I was very fortunate. I've been blessed by some of Gary Kurtz. I've had some really incredible mentors over the years and friends in the field of magic, and then I ended up working at the magic store. And none of this was really by design, but when I look back, it all makes a great deal of sense, right? I was kind of living the life of this. I had this insatiable desire to learn more, and so I was always asking questions. And I wasn't necessarily the quiet guy at the lecture. I was talking to the lecturer afterwards. I would be the guy up the front in line. I was the 5th one in line. I had a question. I had notes. I just loved everything about it. And then there was a point where I started to do, and I'm pretty sure I saw Norm Nielsen doing card manipulation on an old magic show in the late 70s, early 80s, which I can't remember. World of Wonders, maybe something like that. Can't remember the name of it right now. But again, it was that mouth coil like experience for me with the woman dressed up as a rabbit. I couldn't believe my eyes, and so that led me to developing a manipulative act, a coin act that included a floating ball and candles and canes, very classic vaudevillian stuff. But that I ended up not only working that act for almost 20 years, but I made a lot of money doing it, and I traveled with it, and I won some awards with it. And boy, did it allow me to sort of set myself out from other performers in the city. Because I mean, how many people are doing that kind of act? I mean, there's not really a market for it anymore. But that was a real interesting progression for me, and I just fell in love with it. And that's where Herb Morrissey and I connected, because he made his living as a manipulator on a variety show for years in the 50s and 60s.
There's a few things that I want to just interject. There's a few things that I want to highlight out of this. So the first, which is very interesting to me, and it might have to do with I'm not going to say your age, but rather the times.
Yeah, sure.
Is a better way to say it. But at the time, and maybe you'll tell me that it wasn't, it's interesting to me that you got into magic, you were interested in what was going on, and then all of a sudden you were working on an act, a full act that could be sold and can be. That sounds like something that happens much later in this process. So that to me is something that catches my eye as being interesting. But do you have a comment on that? Is there something that inspired you to go towards your act? Am I maybe misunderstanding the timeline, and maybe that happened a little bit later?
No, I think it's a great insight. I think that it did come at a young age. I think by about 19. So I competed in the Stouffville Magic Festival, and I have to go back and see what date that was. I remember the music I used, and it was this kind of a miser's dream-like thing with a few other pieces in it, and it was all coming out of my relationship with Herb Morrissey, and he really was not only a friend, but and I ended up working at the store, and working for a salary, selling zombie gimmicks and polishing dove pans
at
for
a Toronto Magic store.
Polishing dove pans, for heaven's sakes. But in between, it's the in between. How's that? It's those moments where no one was in the store, where Herb would show me a portion of his cigarette act, or his zombie routine, or his card manipulation. And and I know there's some other folks in Toronto who'd agree with me on this, but he had a poetry of motion to the way he did those productions, that work. There was something, you could just tell this guy had not only done the work, but had performed it live and in front of, and I was in. And so I saw this as this huge opportunity to not only develop a better relationship with this man I had so much respect for, but we did end up developing an amazing friendship over many, many years. But he became my co-creator, I guess you could say, and really inspired me to try to set myself apart from other acts in the city.
And that's such a great thing to be able to do when you're in a magic store. So you literally, that's a hub for acts in the city, So it's like you and the magic store owner teaming up to talk about how you can be different from X and Y and Z, and all the different people who are walking in the door.
There's so much going on there. You know what I mean? Like you have a professional relationship with him, where he's giving you this opportunity to work in the field and actually get paid for doing something you love. He's mentoring you when people aren't around. You're learning from the customers. You're becoming friends with him. It's a very it's a great example of how the magic community is so tight, and there's so many different angles you can look at the relationships that we form.
I love that you picked up. I love too that you said, learning from the customers, right? I mean, I think we got to listen. We have to listen to our environment and to the experience. Oscar Wilde said, "Experience is a name we give to our mistakes." I mean, how much we could learn as magicians if we as performers, as speakers, as teachers, if we really took that seriously. And so I think I went in with a posture that said, I'm going in to soak up as much as I possibly can. And each time I get an answer to a question, I'm going to think about that or reflect on it, or maybe I'm going to come back, I hope, with another question tomorrow that's going to help me refine that just a little more. And so I think there's something to be said for just, doing this, listening to podcasts, having conversations with you. I'm so jazzed right now to be talking about this stuff with you guys. It's ridiculous,
Good.
like bring it on, it's just, and for me, it just, again, is a beautiful reminder of that kind of give and take in the community. Right. And sometimes sometimes you sit back and you listen, and other times it's time to talk. It's time to present. It's time to share.
100%. The other thing I was going to mention when you talked about sort of missing out on the community, not to plug certain things, but I will mention it just because, different times in Toronto, and we're going to talk in a minute about Harper's Dinner Magic Theater, because I know that you did some performing there, but different times in Toronto, just like any city, has different levels of engagement and community and things for magic, let's say. And I know that there were different levels. It was when there was Harper's Magic, there was a different level of magic in Toronto than there was when there was Morrissey's and Browsers, and so on and so on and so on. And when the Magic Club, the Toronto Magic Club, was at its highest, at its most booming, versus times when it was lower. So obviously there's up and down. And the reason I brought that up is now Ben Train and I started the Toronto Magic Company to produce shows in Toronto, and it's twofold. It's for the people to go see magic in Toronto, and it's also for magicians to build a community that's centered around performing and putting on shows and doing magic. So I only brought that up to say that community, you obviously highlighted so many times here how just the sense of community, however it comes about for you, which is different based on where you grow up and when you grow up and things like that, but that plays such a big role. So if you live in Toronto, come out. And if you live in your own type of city, either go to the community or make the community. But it's just so important that I wanted to highlight that, that's something that's super important about getting better at magic when you're at a young age.
Absolutely. And I think there's just the conversation and your opportunities to contribute, right? And if you go in with I was going to say a humble posture. I don't know if it's humble, but if you go in with this open sort of sense that I want to learn, I can learn from pretty much everyone. I can learn what not to do. I don't have to always learn what to do, right? And if you go in with that sense, I think, man, I just think, I actually, and the more we talk about it and the more I hear you guys talking about Toronto Magic Company and so on, I truly miss it. It was
the third reason I brought that up is because you should come.
Count me in. I think I've heard
watch shows on stage. You better come. If you tell me you miss magic in Toronto, we solved it. So it's time for you to come.
There you go. Well, then I'm going to say here for you and all your listeners, I will. I'll get Matt DeCero to confirm something for once in his life 2 days out.
Done.
And we'll go.
Done. So let's talk about one of the things that I'm excited to talk to you about is sort of using magic. And Tyler and I have voiced this on the podcast multiple times, and probably neither of us are wise enough to find the correct language to express this so well. So I'm going to express this poorly, and then I'll wait for you to clean up the pieces of what I just said. But if you're not doing magic professionally, Tyler and I urge you to use magic. Don't let it be your secret that nobody knows that you do, but somehow use it to your benefit. And you've found many ways to use magic, whether it's for social change or whether it's to help you speak and get a point across, or so on and so on and so forth. So tell us about that, maybe some highlights of how you've used magic, because that's an area that we rarely get to talk about. We're often talking about how the professional magician uses magic in his show.
Yeah, it's a great question, and thanks for giving me that opportunity to respond. I think currently what I'm doing with magic, or at least thinking about, is so what are all these effects that I've done over this many years, and here's the dozen that I made, or I used to make money in a close-up setting. Here's the stuff I did on stage. Here's the things I want to do. I'm surrounded right now by books and things and gimmicks and packs of cards of things that I'm sort of working on. And I have this idea of how it will fit into a show and so on. So for me, it's very much, I think, and I hope this is part of the answer, but it's very much kind of a dialogue with myself. but also
Right.
with others. So I have a few kind of key people that I go to. Matthew DeCero's one, and Jay Sankey's another, Brian Roberts is another, and James Allen's another, and I'll run my ideas by her. So there's this sort of live part of it, but there's also this idea. A part of it for me that's kind of always going, if that makes sense. And it's not that I'm I guess it's become such a part of, Michael Polanyi, with a philosopher, would say you indwell it. Like, you spend all this time learning it.
Right.
You spend all this time reading books and watching video and going to shows.
And then it's
a part of you. And now you're reaching into this repository, this cone of knowledge that from time to time your mind will access these different things, and you use them in a tacit way. And so the way Herb Morrissey used to say, there's a lot you can tell about a person by the way they pick up a pack of cards, or by the way they hold the pack of cards. And I think I think there's a lot in that. Right? There's is this person theatrical? Have they spent time? Do they really do the inner work? Are they doing exercise? There's all kinds of things that come to bear. It's like making a great golf shot. There's so many different things in making a great golf shot. So I think for me, it's just always been kind of very much a part of my life. And you try to think about it, you read about it, you write about it, you talk about it, and more importantly, and Matt would say this: get out and perform. Get in front of an audience. And work it out. And that's where where the rubber really meets the road. But for me, at a certain point, I think I realized that, I was working in construction. I was working on a couple of philosophy degrees over many years. And I've really thought a lot about and tried to practice this idea of integration. And how do I bring, David Peck, the electrician, local 353, to bear to my, in my philosophy classes, as I'm working on my master's degree in epistemology, for heaven's sakes, to bear on, as I became this social change guy, and who's been working in a country like Cambodia for almost 20 years now, and literacy programs and so on. And so I've got crazy stories of doing magic up the back of pickup trucks in Kenya, and in doing magic in orphanages in Cambodia. Remarkable stuff. And so there's that performing side of it. But I think there was this shift where I said, okay, I can't make a full-time living doing this. I can't, or I'm not willing to put in the time and effort and take the risks that are required in order to do it. I have a profound amount of respect for any performer who makes a living, doing what they do, what they love, and so on. And so I started to look for other ways. How does, so I would write, I've written several philosophical essays about magic and on wonder in particular, this moment. I published an essay in Genie years ago called Standing on the Edge. And it was all about this idea that we get lost in this moment, but we get pulled out of it because we want the answer. This rational sort of side of us takes over, this dualistic mind body kind of like thing. And why is that? And so I just kind of raised some questions around that. So I've really intentionally looked for ways to express myself through my magic that I don't know if I'm breaking any ground with it, but I'm certainly trying to speak in a way that I would like to think is somewhat poetic, or is somewhat going to, somehow going to challenge the status quo. Or maybe more importantly, guys, is to, get you to think a little bit differently about the world we live in today. Think about the average, ordinary experience in a new, wonderful, extraordinary way. And I know that sounds, I know I don't have to justify that to you guys, or because you're magicians, you get that, right? That's what's so beautiful about those moments. So I've tried to adapt that to the work that I've done in social change, the work I've done as a teacher and as a podcaster, even, and as a philosopher. And so I don't know if that really answers it, but it's gotten very practical as well, because
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a few parts of that I think are super interesting. One is that it is the way that it seems is it is one of the, for lack of a better way to explain it, languages that you speak in. It's the same thing as you talk to a friend in Spanish, right?
mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing that is you think about your life through the lens of magic. You think about magic because you enjoy thinking about magic, and then if that can be used as a tool to help you express what you're trying to say, fantastic. If it can't be used as a tool to express what you're trying to say, also fantastic. You know, it's just
Right.
it's in your tool belt of ways to express things and speak your mind and share ideas.
And I think this is what Polanyi meant about indwelling, is there comes a certain point where you can't not think about it, because
Right.
everything you do, like you say, it's a lens. You can't sort of take that lens off. Right.
Yeah.
It's so much a part of your life now that, if you're a filmmaker, you see the world through, a 16:9 frame. You see it through a particular everything comes with a set of presuppositions and filters and so on, and so that's what's kind of cool. So it becomes a part of who you are, and I guess maybe that's what I mean about it being in your blood, I guess, to some degree, but I'm not sure the analogy stands up to a lot of scrutiny, in truth. But anyway,
right.
So then
gets the point across.
It gets the point across. So I've used effects to disrupt a classroom setting. I'll be in my third lecture and I teach once a year at Humber College, and someone will put up their hand, honestly, and I'm in the middle of something, and I don't typically lecture to students. I try to draw things out of them, and someone will put up their hand and they'll say, I've heard you're a magician. Can you show us a trick? like in the middle of a class, and big laugh, and of course when they've got this perception of you as a particular type, this guy's he's a bit of an academic, he's a development guy, he's done a lot of traveling, he does card tricks too. That's kind of cool, and so I think that in itself is sort of disruptive. So I've tried to use that a little bit. And so as a public speaker, instead of going up there and billing myself as a magician who speaks publicly, I'm a public speaker who happens to also do hopefully some really cool, amazing magic. And I think it's a lot stronger, frankly. And I think it's a lot more disruptive as well. And so, I can get more practical with you if you want. Mosquito suck tour. I think frankly, I don't,
we'll get to that. We'll talk about that in a minute.
I love the question.
I'm a little bit curious. Do you open with the magic, or do you always do it after? Because there's sort of I have this idea of when you said you're an academic who also happens to do magic, that you sort of need to lay that groundwork ahead of time. You need to approach them as just David Peck, the human with an education, and then all of a sudden you have this magic, and they're sort of experiencing you and magic versus someone who comes out and says, I'm a magician, and then they have to undo all the, the lenses that non-magicians have about magicians, right?
Correct. And I think oh man, what a great question. What an insightful question, because what you're talking about now is presupposition, right? And I'm trying to smash that. Nietzsche talked about testing idols, and how do you philosophize with a hammer? You take the hammer and you tap the idea and you see if it stands up to scrutiny. So I'm trying to do that by not coming out and saying I'm a magician. And so typically what I do,
right.
And I love the question. So good. I think one of the things that being a manipulator, taught me was, and some of this was just because of the mistakes I made on stage, but I was okay with silence. And so I would I would do something, and I would put my hand into a hat or into a pail, and I would really hold that moment as I displayed the coin to the audience, and I would look at them and I would make eye contact. And so over time, that really helped me, I think, to develop this stage presence, this idea that, silence is okay. You can use that in your favor. You don't have to be nervous. I mean, don't telegraph that to the audience. Right. And so I think that what I do is I will walk out and I will stand, and there's a prolonged silence, and I'll look at the audience, I'll connect, I'll smile, and I'll immediately tell a story. And I try to make it as quick and as engaging and hopefully as thoughtful as I can. And then at the end of the story, there's a slide that relates or whatever. There's something interactive, and I will reach into my pocket and pull out a pack of cards, and I'll walk over to somebody and do, obviously depending on the size of the crowd. It's not like, hey folks, now I'm going to do a trick. But it's, oh, and by the way, would you mind selecting a card? The audience is stunned at this point because I haven't been introduced as a magician, right? So I'm throwing them off. I'm a step ahead of them already, right? Yeah. They've already been misdirected in a sense, if you know what I mean. And so, and by this time they're going, oh, this is my Uncle Bill who does card tricks, and then hopefully you fry them, right? And so that's kind of the approach I've taken. I hope that made sense.
No, for sure. And it's sort of a, not only, all right, do you have to worry about the preconceptions of what the people have, but I think it makes it so much more organic and makes the magic feel more real in that sense, because you're not a magician. When people go to a movie and they see special effects, they're like, okay, I'm at a movie. Same way when they're at a magic show, as amazed and as much wonder as they could be feeling, at the end of the day, they know they're at a magic show. Whereas with you just happen to do something incredibly impossible. So
yeah, hopefully I just knock their socks off, and often I will then take that and use it as potentially as a launching point for another discussion. It's kind of that splash and ripple, right?
So we see it super often now. It's getting very common about using magic to be mixed with speaking. There's many people that are doing magic and motivational speaking and public speaking and things like that. And there's one overlap in there which makes me feel uncomfortable, and I'll bring it up because I'd love to know your feeling and sort of the broadness in which you use magic. So one of the things that I dislike is when a magician does something impossible and then says, you too can do impossible things if you just whatever, follow your dreams or something. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is the magician didn't actually do the thing. So it's like, I don't know, it's like someone who pretended to win the gold medal at the Olympics to tell you that you should follow your dreams and boot everything and go for gold, even though he didn't actually win gold. He's holding a replica and he's lying. So I bring up that question to you because I think that you have the ability to answer it. Right. I may not ask that to any speaker magician, and also because, and hopefully I'm not hinting at your answer, but I'll just put in the word, which is, the capital W, wonder, which I know is what plays such a big role in the reason why you do magic. So talk about that, maybe that issue and what you use magic for, and maybe tell me that I'm wrong, or tell me that you use magic for other things.
Yeah, no, let me see what I can do there. So pretty much all the giants that we've stood on, academically, philosophically, and so on, Plato and Bacon and Descartes and so on, all have said that philosophy begins in wonder. And I think for me wonder, then you can get to magic, you can get to relationships, you can get to community, you can get to so many things. And so if that's true, it seems to me then that magic is rooted in maybe asking good questions, and asking good questions is about disruption and about shocking people out of their complacency, and so I don't necessarily, because what you described to me, Jonah, is gospel magic. Right? It's somebody saying, this handkerchief represents this, or this piece of rope represents this. And, you can do that. And I think there's a place and a time and a place for that kind of a thing. And I think there is a strength to that. I think there's a pedagogical edge to it that might be helpful depending on the context that you're in. And for me, every context is queen. it's everything, right? And so where are you, what are you doing, and how are you doing it? And I think, so you need to be open to the fact that maybe you're going to walk onto this stage and you're going to have to shift something in the middle of the performance. You're going to have to take a different approach, right? You just might have to, depending on what happens contextually to you. So what I think I do, and I hope I do well with magic, is I don't do this represents this kind of a thing. I use it as a way to David Ben would say I use it as a palate cleanser. So it's a way of saying this chapter has just ended, and I've got a new chapter coming, and maybe, just maybe, this is going to foreshadow what's coming up, and then I can refer back to, you remember that moment? You remember that moment when I cut open the lemon and your card was in the middle of it? How did you feel? Right. And so so now I've taken the head, I've taken that desire to know the answer for the trick, I think, and I've attached it, I hope, to their heart. And I've connected that rational and that emotional, if that makes sense. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying I do that every time, or I knock it out of the park every time. But that's the hope so for me. And so I would use an effect. I'm I walk out on stage. Honestly, I'm doing a 45-minute talk. I could also do a 45-minute show. I truly could, because I'm the king of backup. I am the king. I want to know that I've got an extra mic if my mic goes dead on me. There's too many things that have gone wrong on me on stage to not be prepared for my black magic marker not working or something silly,
Right.
So, but I would say I use 3 things at the most. And I really take that vaudevillian notion of let's leave them laughing very, very seriously. I don't want to show them too much magic when I'm doing, a 45 or a 50-minute talk. Always want to leave a little bit of room for Q&A. So, yeah, I mean, I hope that helps. I think I'm with you.
It does. And particularly the thing to highlight there, and it sounds like, I'm glad that you didn't choose to argue with me that that's the type that you, the type that you like to do, but rather you have a different approach. And the part of that approach that is worth highlighting to me is that you bring them back to the emotion, not the magic itself, not the impossibility, and how that is, you too can do something out of reach, but rather pinning it to that emotion, the same way that you see when you see something amazing. That memory is an important memory to you. So hopefully you pin that memory of seeing something amazing with a point or a something.
Well, and I think one of the ways you can do that is you can root things in story. And so I have kind of 3 chapters to a talk. I'll do, let's say it's a 50 verse 55-minute talk, usually about an hour. So I do 3 15-minute segments or 3 10-minute segments, and then I'll have an opening and a closing. I'll have my opening slide, my closing slide. I may not even use my closing slide. It can sometimes just totally depend. And then I'll know that I've got these 3 pieces that I'm going to do, and then I've got an extra just in case. And so I kind of try to craft it that way, if that makes any sense. So it's really really linear and almost causally driven, I guess you could say. But I really do try to root it all in story. And so there's this narrative thread. There's and that's the heart. Again, I think that's, Richard Wagamese said, that First Nations writer, I can't think of the book right now. I'll think of it in a second. But he said that stories are meant to heal, and I think there's something really beautiful about that. And maybe that's something we could think about with magic. Maybe there is actually, as corny as it sounds, maybe there's a step towards some kind of healing. When people get to partake in this different kind of community, and they get to question things in a new way, and then just experience this sense of delight and wonder when this guy I've never met before just vanished a coin. Where the hell did it go? Isn't that wonderful?
Right.
Is that too idealistic? Do I sound like some kind of?
I don't. You know what? I don't know. I don't think it is, but I also what happens to me is what just happened to you. Is anytime I get too highbrow or whatever about what I think magic can do, I think to myself like, it's probably just card tricks.
Yeah. Am I grasping at straws right now? Am I justifying the hours that I put in? I don't know.
Once I get all the way to one end, I immediately sling forward to the other. And then sometimes when I'm going these silly card tricks, I stumble upon something and I'm like, this is profound. Like, think about how this person felt, right?
So I'm gonna make a couple of comments here, because I just, as you were saying that, I just had a little bit of an epiphany. I think I don't think they are just card tricks, because I think they can be. I think they often are, but I think it's, what this is about for me. This is about memory. So this is about wonder. It's about challenging the status quo. It's about community and bringing people in and laughter and creating these moments on stage and so on. But it's about memory. So here, how did we start? Me telling you this crazy story about being in some kind of church basement somewhere and watching some crazy nut dressed up as a rabbit pulling this paper chain out of her mouth. Could you, as you said, get more, in a sense, lowbrow, I suppose, from a performing perspective? Right. But it blew my mind. And clearly had a huge impact on me, right? They're not just tricks.
Yeah, no, unshakable impact.
Yeah, exactly. What a great title.
An irreversible impact,
Yeah.
I mean, like obviously magic has the power to affect long term. Have you ever, obviously we all know when someone's like they're like, I still have the signed card in my purse that the magician,
right.
And in some senses it's just ludicrous. It's just tricks, but in the other sense, like, I must have broke your world in such a way, or brought that to say something or express something or affect you in such a way that you kept a totem,
Right.
a representation of that moment in time. And I would love totems to represent moments in my life that I could look to and think back of. I assume that's why people get tattoos.
Yeah, for sure.
So people are affected by magic. Obviously, I'm not kicking that, but I'm just saying that it is a spectrum. And whenever someone is far on the lines of saying like, I love doing magic because I think when people see magic, they're inspired about all the impossibilities of the world. I like to ask them, I'd love to see the magic that you're doing that's making people be inspired to the endless possibilities of the world. Like I would just, and then, on the other end, when it's like, these are just tricks, I say, no, I don't think they are. Here's an example of how it's affected. So it's a spectrum, we lie somewhere on there depending on who you are and what you're doing. And if you're in the basement of a church wearing a clown costume, or if you're on a stage in front of CEOs and teaching them how to better appreciate them, or whatever the case may be.
There's value in all of the above, it seems to me. And I think sometimes the meaning, sometimes the meaning has to be found. Sometimes you have to work a little harder for it. You got to roll up your sleeve. You got to look for those connections. And Jonah, I'm fascinated by your ethical problem you have though with these public speakers who are using magic to, it's like show me the card trick that's going to drive me to climb Kilimanjaro. That's what I want to see.
Yeah,
totally, literally, that's exactly the way that I feel, and I've felt it for a very long time because, I think that there's a lot in magic that can be helpful, like what you said, as a memory, but it's so often used to say, I did something impossible, you can too. And that is just so bonkers to me that I think it misses the point of using magic. And it also, I think that it's a difficult thing to do magic that affects people. A capital A affect people. Like, this is not an easy thing to take lightly. And maybe that's what I mean by, when people say like, oh, my magic inspires like wonder and all this impossible things. I'm like, just remember that that's a super difficult thing to do. So if you're claiming that, I hope it to be true. I went to see Derek Delgadio's show. I've seen it twice now. Boy, does his magic impact my wonder and the world, the way I feel about the world around me and the way I feel about myself. Totally. But I can't say that about every magic that I've seen. So let's continue and let's talk a little bit more about using magic. So I know that you did a tour with Matt DeZero called a Mosquito Suck Tour, and it has something to do with the big overlaps of the things that you do, which is magic and social change, and using those tools together. And I know that for a lot of people are engaging in social change and social justice and raising money and things like that, there's a lot of overlap in magic.
I think, I'd like to say right out of the gate, we all truly, and again, it sounds corny and trite when you come out with these, some of these statements, but we all have the ability to make a difference, and we're all holding a metaphorical handful of pebbles, and we can drop those into the pond that is the potential for making a difference in the world, and then we can watch the ripples grow. And sometimes we got to look back, like I said before, to see some of those ripples. But we have to. I think we have to get out of bed in the morning thinking we can change the world, and in fact we are changing the world. Now let's ask some questions around how. And let's talk about that. Can we turn up the heat on that? Do we have to tweak it a little bit? How can we do things a little bit differently than we did yesterday, and so on? So
that's right. Just to pause. I love the thought there, which is sort of counterintuitive to any sort of motivation or amplification I've ever heard before, which is saying like, today is not day one. Today is day 149. We are already changing the world. Let's just be better. It's not like, hey, everybody wake up. You need to start recycling. You probably already recycle. How can you recycle more? Or something to that end. So I love that idea of we're already doing good. We're better than we were 50, 100 years ago.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to throw a little wrench into the engine on the other side of that, three-sided coin is this idea that we're also potentially doing a lot of things that aren't so good. Where do we buy our clothes from? Are we eating sustainable foods? What are we shoveling into our bodies? And what are we doing to the climate and the environment and so on? So these are big questions, but the reality is that, man, when you look at some of these solutions, I had a podcast I was doing with a guy recently. He's a fund manager, and he said, David, in 10 or 12 or 15 years, there is going to be over $100 trillion that's going to be passed on to a new generation over a period of time. Imagine what that generation or those series of people are going to be able to do with that money if they walk into it in a particular way. If they walk into it with, the right lenses or the wrong, what are the implications? It's a big question. So yeah, the mosquito suck tour was something that was driven by some funding that we were able to get out of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, believe it or not. And it was, how can I marry something here in Ontario with something going on another part of the world? And so we got, I guess you could say, sort of turned on to a couple of different initiatives that we're actually buying mosquito nets for people in three different countries and in certain communities, and $10. One net, very practical, very utilitarian. And so we knew that if we raised $1,000, we could provide 100 bed nets, 5 people could be saved, lives could be saved from this bed net, and so on and so on. So there were some really practical outcomes. And then I said, well, hang on a minute. I love philosophy. I love asking questions. I love doing magic. How can we bring all of this stuff, kind of together? And so got a few people in the room. We wrote a proposal, and it's never this simple. There's obviously a lot of other pieces to the puzzle, but we were funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation for 2 years, and we were it really is, and we were able to get in front of probably 25,000 students over the life of the project, and then it lived for a couple of years after that. Matt DeCero would, and he and I worked on this. James Allen actually worked a little bit on the show with us as well. We created curriculum. We created some really fun, cool videos. I mean, we had a blast, and then I think another thing for me was another criteria was, how can I do something that's actually going to affect some change and do it with some people that I love, that I want to be around, that
totally part of the whole excitement about us talking about using the tools that you have to affect change, which is something that I'm super mega passionate about. But the exciting things about that is, one of the tools that you have is your abilities and your knowledge, and the other tools that you have is your friendship and your relationships with the people around you that also have different tools that they have that they can, that's part of the whole excitement in doing something. Never mind, let's just pause for a second about social change. Just like whenever you're working on a project, the exciting things are using your knowledge and working with other people who have other knowledge, right? And the added benefit that you can point all of those arrows towards social change is fantastic, because at the end of it, everyone's not however many dollars richer, but instead you've all together made an impact, and everything is better because of it. You're better because of it. The world is better because of it. You've really done something.
Love your thoughts there, because I think you're absolutely right. And maybe here's the lesson for all of us, including myself, when we step into any of these types of things, whatever it is, whether it's a new show or how can we change the world as well? Is this just going to be a footnote to what we do here in this event or this initiative? Is it a fundraiser? Can we ask new questions? Can we provide some new information? Is it about a new slide? Is it what people are going to experience when they walk into the theater? There are lots of ways of doing it. And for me, that's what's so great about that, sort of the metaphor of looking at life as a conversation. Life, it's not about getting it all right today. It's about continuing the dialogue tomorrow. And I think a lot of that has to do with surrounding yourself with community, but with the right people, with the right community, right? And I don't mean that in a selfish kind of, I'm going to hang out with Gary Kurtz because I know he's going to teach me some great coin work. You do it because there is value in getting together with Gary Kurtz either way, right? And I think if you start there, if that's your first thing, if that's your starting point out of the gate, and you see value in relationship, you see value in people, that's not a bad place to start. And so we had to write into this proposal. We had to write, we're going to get in front of 15 schools, and it's going to cost us $1,500 to get a PowerPoint projector, and it's going to cost this, and it's going to, it was a lot of work. I didn't think it was going to work. I didn't think it was going to happen. And we were blown away. I mean, they gave us $150,000, and
wow.
Yep. And I mean, we didn't get rich beyond our wildest dreams off this, believe me, but it was a really amazing and incredible experience. And I hope Matthew DeCero would speak the same way of it. I think he does. And we had this opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you, he's listening to this, and he'll share it 3 days after, talking about how amazing it was, because he usually does. And we talk about him a lot on this thing.
Oh, cool. Fun. Yeah.
I'm sure he's going to have some great things to say.
Well, Matt is a dear friend and such a talented performer and such a hardworking guy. He's just, he's making it happen. And he's probably laughing out loud right now, rolling his eyes and thinking of something funny to say, no doubt. Or maybe to show me the new work on the La Paul Invisible Pass. But, he's so engaged, and you know what I love about Matt too is he has this ability to work pretty much, and I've worked with him a lot. He has pretty much the ability to work any room. Totally. He could do a show on an oil rig, and I don't mean for oil riggers, but actually on an oil rig, or off the back of a pickup truck on a farm, or at your most intimate setting. It's in somebody's living room, in Bridle Path in Toronto. So anyway, ton of experience there. But we had this wonderful. I mean, who doesn't want to work with people they care about? Who doesn't want to work with their friends?
And that's like, again, one of the things that totally, and one of the parts to highlight there is, if you want, and this might be morally or whatever, maybe the wrong approach, but I always love thinking about this, is before you try entrepreneurship, try charity raising, only because it's got all the same excitement. You get to work with all the people, you get to do all this different stuff, except the success of it means that the money goes to charity. And what's secretly good about that is all of you that are all volunteering to make it happen, all of you make nothing. So if you raise $100 for your charity, or if you raise $5,000 for your charity, is all based on how hard you're working. None of that is a failure.
Right.
Whether you give the charity $100 or $5,000 or $10,000, none of it's a failure. So long as you didn't take money from the charity, which I'm sure that's not how charity events work. So as long as you're not doing that, you're doing good, and you get to try for the very first time, possibly, working together. So I know that's not the moral, and it's not exactly what you were talking about, but it's sort of a little piece of advice that I love. You want to try running a show, put on a show for charity, because it can't go wrong.
Well, I think a great question for a lot of things is, should I call this person? Should I get together with them? Should I step into a conversation? What's the downside? And I think that's a pretty easy tool to just question to ask of pretty much anything. And often there's a lot of downsides, right? But
sometimes there are.
But I don't think insecurity and fear should be two of the first ones that come up. And I think often they are. And that takes time. That takes time to get over those things. And man,
it's a muscle like anything else.
It is a muscle like anything. I think it's
get used to.
Yeah, and I think it's great advice to find the right partner and
just try it. Really, just try charity stuff. Really try it, because there's no downside. That's the advice from me.
And it's really a part of my history, because it goes way back and it, my upbringing and so on. And we could get into some of the details, but I remember putting on a carnival in my backyard to raise money for something. I'm going to think of it in a second. I think it was the MS Society, and it was kind of like we had a couple tents set up, and we had these games that people could come and buy tickets for and so on. And it was out of Buffalo, actually. It was really cool. It was off a TV show that I grew up watching. And I remember that, oh man, like it was yesterday, honestly. And I was about probably 6 or 7. Now, granted, my parents probably helped with it all, but at the same time, there was for some reason there was this desire to reach out. Yeah. And I think it's a good place to start. So I think your advice is great.
Totally. So let's keep moving. There's so many different things that I want to talk about. One is I just wanted to highlight only because it's an empty gap that I like to keep filling in my brain, but really about the time just a 10 to 20 years before I had and Tyler and I had anything to do with the magic scene in Toronto. And the name and the thing that keeps popping up, another overlap with Matt Zero and the Evisons and so much more, is Harper's Harper's Dinner Magic Theater, and a few other things that happened in Toronto or near Toronto that you had your hand in. So I want to talk about that, and I also want to talk about the show on a kids channel that I watched called Spells.
Yes. Oh,
with
man.
Jay Sankey on it that I didn't really realize that you had a role in until doing some research, and something that I watched. So it's just super interesting, these two things that to me were Canada and Toronto staples, one which I got a chance to be a part of as it was happening culturally, which was the show Spells, and one
That's
of which
awesome.
I only get to bask in the amazingness of now 20 or 30 years later, which is Harper's Magic Dinner Magic Theater. And I get to keep hearing about all these magicians that are amazing say to me, well, where I really got my start? At Harper's. So
Right.
I said a lot about those two subjects, but maybe can you say just something about either of those two things and how they helped form where you are?
Well, they really are formative things, right? And I think I kind of often take the approach that that a question something I need to say more often is no. I mean, that's one thing I haven't done well at, and you can probably you can look at my CV and go, holy smokes, the guy that we did 52 episodes of that show Spells, and I
was so much magic.
Yeah, and I would say that not only did I get it off the ground because I developed the relationship with a couple of the production companies, but I mean, it was very much Jay's show, but it was written by somebody. I mean, there was 15 or 20 creative people involved in that, but again, it was this collaborative affair, right? It was about all the things we're talking about here. It was about wonder. It was about community. It was about building relationships. It was about conversations and the theatrics and thinking about the words you're going to use. I mean, there's so many things that came together so well to make that happen.
Everything.
But it all started with a conversation, Jay and I, hey, what if we did this? Why don't we try that? And so, so that's awesome that you sort of a staple. I've never heard of Spells referred to as a staple, but that's so cool that you've seen the show, first of all, and that presumably you liked it. So I
think it was in my schedule as a young kid.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So what was important to us is we had a few things. We wanted to do a little bit of magic. We wanted to be respectful. We wanted to teach some history about it. And we wanted to engage. And of course, we had to also accommodate TVO and the producers. And that was part of the agreement that we signed. And so we had to make it a bit more goofy than we probably wanted to, and so on and so forth. And so, there's things that, everything comes with a cost, right? So Spells was I mean, it's a longer story. It was over 2 years. It was a lot of work that Jay had been already doing for years, and we just kind of brought a lot of things together.
Thankfully, you have not to take away the spotlight, but thankfully you have you had the genius that is the creator, Jay Sankey, to make 52 episodes.
That's right.
Like, there's not a lot of magicians in the world, which I would say we need 52 episodes worth of magic for you to teach, and we need it now. Basically only Jay Sankey makes that list of people that could do that, right? Like,
he's had a huge, huge impact. He's become a very close friend over the years, and we've and I think just a little comment about the friends of me, the friends that I've made in magic and the community that I've developed. I think for me, the ones that have really, I guess stuck with me or I've stuck with them, I suppose. Obviously, it's a two-way kind of a thing, and there's a give and take and so on. But I think the relationships grew outside of magic as well. And so our families connected, or we shared an academic interest, or maybe it was, so I guess my point is to that sort of that well-rounded like nature. We talked about other things as well. It wasn't always just about the subtleties behind a double turnover, a new force of a card, or a new transfer of a coin.
And also, like, so obviously in what you're saying, like like so clearly who it turns out you're talking about are your best friends in Magic. You know, these Matt Dezeros, the Jay Sankis of the world. Wow, big surprise. The people that you did large scale projects with
Yes.
and worked with for many hours on things that you were all passionate about. Wow, big shocker.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you want to, you know, like you want to know the secret to having a good community and having lifelong friends in Magic, don't just watch it and not talk to someone. Start a Magic podcast with your best friend magician, and I promise you, you guys will have plenty to talk about forever, right? Like, start a Toronto Magic company with your friend. Start a Toronto Magic company. I promise you, you guys will have to spend so many hours together that you won't know up from that. You'll know each other's diets, you know, like you want to know the secret here. It's start projects with these people in Magic that you want to work with and you'd like to be friends with for 30 years and not 2. Like
absolutely. Yeah. And I think
it's very clear.
I think you're speaking to that the commitment to community, right? The commitment to relationships. You've got to do some hard work. You got to go the extra mile. You're going to have to take some risks. You're probably going to have some conflict, but can you listen? Can you help when it's needed?
Right.
You know, I mean, can you step back when you have to? Can you share the limelight? I mean, these are all really important questions. I have a great story that involves a black and white photo, a large mound of American cash, and a Playboy magazine, and it all took place in a hotel in Louisiana. So at another time, and that involves
This sounds like the beginning of a Malcolm Gladwell book. What you can learn from a stack of bills, a black and white photo, and a hotel in Louisiana.
Yeah, and it involves Jay Sankey as well. It's so. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I have to hear it, but maybe for another time. Let's talk about Harper's a little bit. Almost that's sort of my guilty historian. I don't care about history about anything, but I care about the history of Harper's. So tell me a little bit about what effect that had on you, and paint me a picture of what it was like to be there during a time that sounds like it was had a super large effect on magicians in Toronto. Is that location, that one?
It really did. And I mean, there's so many different things I could talk about. And again, the theme for me on our conversation today for sure has been, I don't know, community and conversation, I suppose. Maybe that's been one of the threads. There's quite a few of them. I'm so loving this, by the way. And congratulations to you guys too, by the way, for what you're doing. And I so love the title of, of the podcast and the conversation.
You're the first person that likes the title.
Oh, is that right?
People don't ever say that.
That's funny.
Well, Tyler and I, not that we don't like the title that we created ourselves, but definitely we could have done a better job of. And you liking the title obviously means that you're understanding what it was that we were trying to get across. Yeah. But it is very clunky as a title.
It's a little. What's the word?
It turns out the word discourse isn't.
Yes, no, for sure. Totally, yeah, but anyway, totally. So Harper's was. To say it was formative is an understatement. I mean, some of the performers there, I've got great friendships still with today, and Glenn Ottaway, and I mean, is one. I mean, of so many, and it's just so wonderful to see some of these guys again. I recently was at a show, and there were 3 or 4 people from Harper's, and it kind of felt like it was a little bit of a reunion. And the stuff that went on before the show, the stuff that went on backstage, the camaraderie, and I mean, I think it's going to sound so romantic, right? And it kind of was. It certainly was for me, and I think it was for a lot of others as well. And I guess I worked on and off there for about 5 years, and I think it gave me a place to work. I was a construction electrician at the time, and so studying philosophy as well. Like I needed something else on my plate, so I was doing an undergrad at York. It took me 10 years to do. It took me 10 years to get an honors degree in philosophy, and doing nighttime shows at Harper's, and then doing corporate gigs and so on, because there was a lot of other work that came out of Harper's as well. And so you could do the close-up, you could do the MC, you could be the closing act, you could be the middle act, or you could be the opening act. And I was most often the opening act. I think once or twice I emceed, and then I think I occasionally from time to time would do stand-up there if they really needed help. But where I think I really not only thrived but excelled was in the coin act that I referred to way back. And it was one of the last places, honestly, in Toronto post I guess you could say 50s and 60s, which is sort of post vaudeville, where you could do an act like that. And it was a 12 and a half minute act. And I didn't speak at all. And it was coins and candles, and I tried to engage the audience, and I had terrible angles, and we had a crummy backstage space to set up in, and I mean, just, but the lessons that I learned, and again and again, I mean, I really honestly, not to as my dad would say, flog a dead horse. I don't know if anyone even knows what that means anymore, but so I think it's a horrible metaphor. So you know what? As of today, I'm going to stop using it. But anyway, it's not to, I think, again, we're talking about community here. And I think what made the most sense for me in that time was, the relationships that I was actually building there. And then, of course, all the stuff you just learned about performing and magic and the theater of it and the props and what does it mean, how the different settings that you had to work with. I remember one night we were there, I'll never forget this. And it was often bus tours that would populate the audiences. And the show ran for, I think, almost 9 years. And Tuesday to Saturday, two shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. I mean, how do you sustain that, right? I mean, that's huge. Anyway, I remember this crowd of old folks came in to see the show, and most of them sat with their backs to the stage. I'm not joking. Sat with their backs to the stage. And then at the intermission, there was always a few minute intermission where people could order another drink, maybe get their dessert, go to the washroom, go have a smoke. Or you probably could smoke inside. I'm pretty sure you could at the time. But anyway, and at intermission, they all got up and left. And they got into their bus and they left because it was too loud and it was too bright. Those were the 2 complaints. And I remember Glenn Ottaway coming back from being on stage in the intermission, and he was so angry and so pissed off that the majority of his audience had just left the building. It was just so. I mean, just those moments, funny. Right? Of what do you learn from that? And and I think that I could come full circle and sort of close the loop on that. Oscar Wilde, experience is the name we give to our mistakes, right? The things that we learn along the way. And so, for me though, as a magician, it just gave me the perfect environment to work on an act that I couldn't have perfected. Not that I perfected it, but that I did it hundreds of times, and then and was able to compete with it and travel with it and be a part of some really wonderful road variety shows as well. I couldn't have done that had I not had a place where I could have worked out some of the kinks on a day in and day out, and I didn't work there every night. I would get 2-week runs. I would get a 3-week run from time to time, but most often I would fill in for another guy by the name of Vishwambar Das, who used to do a dove act. And I never really resonated with doves. So yeah, I was, imagine the tails and the whole works. And I actually had hair back then.
Well, the thing to highlight there, which to me is very interesting, is, let's not forget, obviously, that to put together a long or never mind long, but just to put together an amazing act, which is sellable and people enjoy and all this different stuff, and to put in the flight time, the how many thousand hours that it is difficult and potentially not enjoyable. I think it's enjoyable, but whatever, potentially not enjoyable. The part that I'm trying to highlight here is if you're doing it in a place where you're comfortable with people that you like being with and spending time with and learning together and experience, then those, let's just pretend and say 10,000 hours, those necessary 10,000 hours that you need to put in before you're epic on stage, it's not so bad. It doesn't hurt so bad, right? Like it doesn't hurt so bad if you have to spend it or if you get to spend it with amazing people around you. And that's in a boat that I'm currently in right now, where I'm taking up a lot of obviously paid performance opportunities, but I'm taking up a lot of free performance opportunities so long as I get to perform with a whole bunch of my other magician friends and get to enjoy it and learn something and keep playing with that act. And it turns out, obviously, that you had an act that was honed there that then made you a living or an income.
Absolutely. And provided opportunities for me that I would never have had. And also provided, I think, again, a form of expression, a way of getting something out of my system and onto the page, as it were, and onto the stage, I guess you could say. And I, as I was just listening to you speak there, I wonder if ultimately I was doing it. Yeah, of course I was doing it for the paycheck, but I really wasn't. I've never, I've never really been motivated by
No,
money.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure you were being paid
It
pennies.
wasn't a lot of money. No, it wasn't. And maybe $75 a show, I think, a night, I think is what we were getting. And I think maybe the fill-in acts got 85 on the weekends, something like that. And then, you might get a deal on some
Yeah.
of the food and so on. But, often these shows, and even two shows on a Friday or Saturday night, would end up with 3 or 4 people sitting around the bar afterwards
Totally.
just outside of the theater. And the show was called A Little Night Magic, by the way, which is a lovely, lovely title for a show. But
Yeah.
yes, but I wonder if was it the paycheck, was it the performing, or was it the people? Was it really the community that actually pulled me in? And I bet you, if we could somehow do do an analysis of that, a substantive sort of quantify it somehow, I bet we'd find that it was more the relationships that drew me in.
Well, what I'll say, and then I won't plug Toronto Magic Company anymore in this episode, but we have a weekly show called The Newest Trick in the Book, which is 5 magicians do new material, and it happens every week, and it is awesome. And it's also just built a community of magicians. You get like 25 or 30 magicians that come out to this show every single week, even though only 5 of them are performing, because like I mentioned before in different words, but I'll say again in a different way, but it's a community, and it's a community that's focused around this time performing, and nobody makes any money from the show. None of the performers are paid. It's an open mic night. It's pass the hat, and the money goes just basically towards letting the show run. Like the show breaks even, like it makes no money. And I bring that up not so anybody cares about the finances, but because I'm in awe that week over week, it's a party there
right.
of magicians who love coming, and they are paying out of their pocket to be there, to transport there a lot of the times and things like that. So definitely, we know we've run the test. It's true. Community pays off, right? And we've looked at the numbers, and
right. The numbers are good.
Right, the numbers are in, and that's how it works. So I love that, and it's cool that once again, what you were seeing however many years ago, 30 years ago, I'm seeing again mirrored in the Toronto Magic Company in obviously a little bit of a different way. So let's talk about, now that we are getting to nearing the end, let's talk about the podcast Face to Face, which is the name of your podcast, which has been going on for, if my numbers are correct, eternity. I always feel when I look at our podcast, as the numbers grow, every now and then I'm like, what? How could this be episode 124? Like what? Like how could this be? And then I find yours are one of the few podcasts that someone says you should check it out. You look and you're like, oh wow, like 300 episodes. Like my God, the same as the magic word, right? You find it and you're like, wow, this person has been doing this for a very long time. And the beauty of it is not only a document of all of the people that you've interviewed, and this is something that we see obviously with the longevity of a podcast, but it's also a documentation of you and your life and how you change and what interests you. I'm sure if I interviewed you 5 years from now, we would be talking about entirely different things. But as it stands now, I'm very excited about projects and raising money and so on and so on and so on. So
yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's growth, right? That is change, right?
It's exactly right. So let's talk. Tell us a little bit about sort of what it was, and then I know there's a relaunch going on, and I'd love to hear about what it is, and maybe this new awakening. What's exciting about it for the future, and why it's being relaunched right now.
Yeah. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to chat about it. I like you guys. I can tell I really love doing it. I mean, I really do love the conversation. I love the research that I do for a new film or a new book. I'm now at a point where I don't even almost have to request books. They just appear. They arrive in the mail, which is so wonderful, or they're couriered to me. And I've met so many interesting, wonderful people who are doing really, truly remarkable things around the world that, frankly, most people probably haven't heard of, that aren't going to come across their books. So I wanted this to be an opportunity to celebrate them and to celebrate their work and to say, what you're doing matters. And let's hope that we can actually move the needle a little bit, have a great conversation, maybe have a few laughs, and just maybe affect the way somebody sees the world. And so,
Totally.
and sometimes the questions come up, and I love those moments where you didn't think it was going to go there, and for me, it's about having a great conversation. So there's nothing better than sitting down with somebody for a couple of hours. I can do parties, but I much prefer kind of a one-on-one, face-to-face
Podcasts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I can go to parties, but I much prefer podcasts.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great opening line.
That's how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a great opening line for a show. I think walk out on stage and say that. But it's the conversation, and it's about peeling back the layers for me. So again, a good conversation I think is rooted in wonder, and it's rooted in conversation and asking. Asking relevant and substantive questions that you hope are going to get you to. Well, you don't know where you're going to go, right? And I think that's the beauty of it, and I think that's what's exciting about it. And to me, now we're talking about wonder again, and it's just wonderful stuff. I love finding the connections.
So there's a few things that I want to mention about it before we dive a little deeper into it. So the first is. I love you're talking about, that it's about wonder, and it's just about the conversation, and it's about sort of putting someone else's voice out there, which is awesome and very obviously apparent, and something that we have in common with these two podcasts. But I'll just tell a very quick story, which is, and I don't know that I've ever actually said the details of this story, but we were slated to interview Eugene Berger, which took me like about a year to put together. And then he sent me a message and he said, "I'm sorry, I have to go in for some blood work. Let's postpone it a week." And then he passed away. And it was very unfortunate.
So
I was very sad. Yeah. Anyways, in my preparation for the interview, I listened to your interview with Eugene Berger. And that was, and just if to put it simply, if you want to know what my interview would have been, go listen to, like, if you were saying to yourself at home, "Oh, I wish that I would have heard it," just go listen to that. Not obviously it wouldn't have been the same, but you really get to hear his voice, and you get to hear the right types of questions being asked. So I want to thank you for that, but also open up that you would think that a podcast who has someone like Eugene Berger on and is talking about wonder, that's what it would be about. But it's actually, as a podcast is about so much, and there's so many topics that you go into. So I know we spoke sort of vaguely about what it's about, but in real close detail, if people are listening to this, if they're in the business of adding potentially new podcasts to their life, right? If someone's listening to this, they're in that. So really, like, I'm really trying to pull a solid pitch out of you in the sense of, like, what is it? Like, what can somebody at home, why should somebody listen to it? I know why I've listened to it in the past, and it is to highlight the people who you are talking to and what those subjects are about. But what is it a podcast about? Like, tell us really about what it is.
I mean, I think it's about relationships. I really do. And I think it's about asking good questions. And I think it's about building community. And I think, so we're rebranding. You mentioned it. It's coming up pretty soon. In fact, the Toronto International Film Festival is coming up in about 4 weeks. 2018's new film festival, already starting to see invites. In fact, I have my first interview booked already.
Wow.
But we're rebranding for that to launch in the next couple of weeks. And the new kind of tagline is face to face. It's a weekly podcast with remarkable people doing wonderful things. And so it's leaving me open to for the most part, I'm now speaking to filmmakers. Actually, I have a love for film, and I did a double major in philosophy and film in my undergrad, and so I have a love for film. I have a love for asking questions. Why wouldn't I bring the two together? Right. So I would say 60% of my guests are filmmakers, producers, or actors.
Right.
And then magicians and philosophers and comedians and sometimes theologians, and I've had cooks on, I've had poets, and a lot of authors, a couple of
it's really about the people.
It's about the people. And you know what, guys, I think, I'm so glad you asked me, because I think it's about the idea,
Right.
and it's about the idea, and it's about the insight. And so, with Malcolm Gladwell's, I mean, think of how many insights, right? That, or people like that. And I think we all can have these great conversations. And so I really want to try to challenge people, but in a really interesting and I hope fun and engaging way, to say, wow, I never knew that, or I never thought that, or I haven't had that observation before. So for me, it's about peeling back the layers. But the one liner is, weekly podcasts with remarkable people doing wonderful things. And it really is about social change. And I want to say to folks that, you are doing it. You can do it. You are doing it, and now maybe it's time to just ask the question about, are you in the ballpark? Is it what you? Is this about your legacy? Is can we turn it up to 11? You know what I mean?
Right.
And so on. So I mean, that's way longer than a 30-second elevator speech.
That's
But
perfect.
I don't believe in those.
I'll add to it that if it's at all excited you or interest you in what you've said so far, what I recommend is for someone to just go to the website. I believe it was at face2face.com.
It's actually face-to-face.
But anyways, face2facelive.ca, go, and I know they're doing a little update to the design, so who knows if you listen to this before or after, but just go look through some of the guests, and I guarantee you, on purely the number of guests that are there, you'll find someone that maybe you want to hear more from, but more likely you've probably never heard from before,
Yes. Yeah, it's
you'll hear,
very true.
Yeah, it'll say like, master of this or, expert at this. And you might not have even known that someone could be an expert at that.
Right. So that's true.
Really, and that's how one of the things that your eyes will be open to in just looking through the potential episodes that are there. And I'll tell you that I've enjoyed it and it's really awesome.
Thanks.
And this month, this is the second time that we've recommended a podcast. So, but I'm very excited about that because I think, and I'm sure you've seen the growth in podcasting in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, really.
No, for sure.
And
it's huge.
You've been you've been on the roller coaster for the whole time. And I just want to encourage people because I see how well people learn from listening, and it's such a beautiful platform. So I encourage people to go and check it out.
It is a beautiful platform, and thanks for such a lovely plug and for being so supportive and having me on the show. And I mean, you know what? A great conversation never ends.
Right.
There you go.
So I'm hoping, guys, that you'll be inviting me on for part 2 in the near future. I'm teasing.
No one in the history of this podcast has ever been on for an official part 2, but who's to say you're not going to be the first?
No one's ever asked, right?
No one ever asked. That's true.
That's funny. That's funny. But truly, I mean that. Isn't that kind of? And let's get back to the theatrics of it. Isn't that the leave them laughing? Isn't that you walk out, you get in the car, you drive away, you go, holy smokes, that was awesome.
Right.
Wow, what a night. And I can't wait to follow up, or I can't wait to I've got more questions. I should have asked him this. Why didn't I say that?
Totally.
That's an amazing, and that's the stuff of life, right?
That goes back to what you said at the beginning. I don't remember the words, but you said something about how how that magic moment is a resonant one. Like I don't remember the way you said it, but it stays with you. Like in the same way, like, missing a question on an interview stays with you. But like, that's the magic that it's all made of, right? It's all made of the limitedness of it all. You give someone a show that's amazing and impossible. And, hopefully when your show is so amazing, there's a point where the audience member looks up in the middle of the show and they just think to themselves, I wonder how many minutes this show is in. I hope it never ends.
Right.
Yes. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I know I've experienced that. You're watching a show or a movie or something
where you're just like, oh no, I've been here for an hour and a half already. This is going to be over any moment.
I wish I could be in this forever. I wish I could be. I can only imagine how skydivers feel when they jump out of a plane and they're like, damn it, it's only 14 seconds of falling until I have to pull
That's
the
right.
Right.
That's right.
But that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about elongating a moment and it lasting forever. So I think that whether that's a show you're putting on or a podcast you're producing or a community that's being built because of work that you're doing.
Absolutely. I think it's a good way to look through it. It's a good lens to slide on. Now, frankly, it's a good lens to keep on, right? And again, that's about just sort of living it out. Living. A friend of mine has this phrase: "Live within the grace of one day," and it's just such a beautiful way. Mm-hmm. You presuppose value. You say there is meaning to be had here in the ordinary and average and the unexpected. And so all of a sudden it gives meaning. It gives meaning to handshakes and to making eye contact and to smiling at somebody. I mean, it can be so trite and corny, but I think it can be beautiful and profound as well.
Well, yeah. Well, listen. There's like our talking about of magic and whether it has an impact or not. You can go through life one of two ways. You can either not have any impact in every handshake and every bit of eye contact, every movie you see, every book you read. All of that can just be entertainment or moments, or every one of those moments you can be so present and so aware as to how a handshake is a form of you connecting with someone, and eye contact is a way for you guys to further your closeness, and watching a movie is your way to learn something about the world, and so on and so on, right? You're choosing to, so try to enjoy it or take something from it.
Absolutely.
So now we're getting towards the part of the episode where we have a bunch of sort of rapid fire and wrap up questions to wrap up the episode. So the first one that we'll start with is the question of the week. So you have an opportunity to ask a question to all of the magicians in our audience, and it can either be a question that you would like them all to be introspective about and ponder upon, or it can be a question that now you have thousands, let's say, of magicians at your disposal to hear what magicians really think about X. So you get to ask them a question. It can be either or. What would you like to ask the magicians of the world?
I think what assumptions are you currently making that need to be checked, modified, or restated? So that's yeah, or maybe simply, what's the last book that you read?
I love both of those, and maybe that's one of each, right? So yeah, so the one about assumptions, that one's for you to answer, and then the book is leave a comment. Like, I'd literally love to know, like, what is the last book that you read, and did you actually read it? Was it in paper? Was it on Kindle? Was it an audiobook?
Nice.
What was the experience like?
No, that's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah, no, and for me, reading is about the possible, right? It's about the what's next.
It's amazing. Tyler, do you have the next question?
Yeah, so this is kind of similar to the first question of the week, but it's the magical PSA. So anything you think that our audience needs to hear, it can be advice from start doing this to stop doing that. We heard everything from stop doing the banana bandana to love yourself. So
does it have to be like, does it have to fit on a bumper sticker, or
it can be as long as you want?
It's a PSA.
Find someone you can trust and listen to most of the advice that they give you.
I love that.
That's great. And it's super clear. Find someone that you can trust and start, listen to their advice and work together.
And work together. It's a back and forth, right? And totally. it's So I think, I mean,
like we were saying about we're joking about you working with Jay Sankey and how fantastic he is. Every relationship is not necessarily a mentor-mentee, but rather different people coming at things with different skills. Right. And sometimes that means working with someone who is fantastically better than you, but sometimes that means working with someone that's fantastically better than you at their thing, but you're fantastically better than they could ever be at your thing.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Just really working together. It might not have to be about learning directly, but working together. And I love that PSA is listened to most of what they have to say. Another question, which we phased out for a bit, but I'm bringing back because I'm interested in, and particularly I want to know what you have to say about it. But what is one thing in the 2018-2019 world about magic that you like, and something about the 2018-2019 world of magic that you don't like, that you could do without?
So great questions. I mean, I think I like that people still love magic. I really do. And
there's always a little worry, in the back of your head that it's like, when I grow up, no one will like this
and
anymore.
I think there was a part in the time in my life where I just got really cynical. Okay, not another card trick, right? I can't take these people's money for what I'm doing tonight. It just doesn't make sense. That there's, what real value am I providing here? And so, but that's really shifted for me. So I think there's Yeah, there's a sense that I mean, even today, I was in a meeting today, and somebody, and this rarely happens these days, but somebody introduced me and said, "Oh, do you know? By the way, David's a magician. Did you know that?" And it was this beautiful, fun moment, and it wasn't goofy.
Yeah, it's
It
a
wasn't
strange
goofy.
moment.
There was respect there, and I didn't have to crack out my Svengali deck. I just.
Right.
It was, yeah. Anyway, so I think that's really, I think it's wonderful. I think it also says a great deal about the staying power of the craft. I really do. What do I not like about magic? I don't know. I think there might be too much magic on TV. I long for the theater. I really do. And maybe I'm just a big old fat fart. But I sometimes wonder if there was a place where, magic was really meant to be seen. And it's just it's a different experience, right? It's a
Well, something about magic, which we sort of touched on in some different ways, is, and I love to say this, but magic is the only thing or one of the only things where it's such an experience that it's like you have to go there.
Yes.
You have to go you have to see it. You have to see what it's like. Someone describing a specific waterfall. Like someone can't describe it. You have to go to the waterfall. Like you have to go, and there's nothing more. You have to be there. You have to see it. You have to go to there than magic is, right? So I love what you're saying about seeing it more in person, because it lends to that. It's like you have to see it, experience it.
Absolutely, and I think there's the analogy for me is, and we could extend it as long as we want, I suppose. But seeing Blade Runner 2049 or Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk or Interstellar, the way it was meant to be seen, and then watching it on your Android
iPhone
device
in bed
is the. Do I need to say anything else?
Yeah,
right.
No,
They're both different. You're going to come away with a different experience, and you're going to have a different narrative probably, but you're certainly not going to have seen it the way the director intended you to see it, or the writer intended you to see it, and the experience is going to be really different. So there's something. Yeah, I long for a more theatrical time.
It's fair. That's very fair.
Love it.
Yeah. The next in the wrap-up questions, we call it the endless chain of magicians. So in order to keep the podcast going forever, we have each guest recommend a potential future guest, with the only caveat being you have to be able to give us their contact information, like email or phone number or something.
Right. But I don't have to do that on air, right?
No.
No. But you can't just be like David Copperfield.
That's right.
Although I guess someone just did that to us. But.
That's right. Great, fun. How about? And I have not listened to all of your interviews, so I don't know.
Whoever you say, if we've had, I'll tell you.
So how about Jay Sankey, Richie Sanders, or Greg Fruin?
Awesome.
All three are people who we are working towards getting on, and I'd love to get all three of them on.
All right.
So
done, and we can talk for sure. Yeah, I'd love to do that. I love what you guys. Honestly, I love what you guys are doing, and I will put in a good word. How's that?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll tell you a week ago, I was doing magic up at a camp, and some kid says to me, he goes, "My uncle is a magician. Do you know him?" I said, "Oh, who is he?" He goes, "Richard Sanders?" I said, "Yes, of course I know him." And I watched him lecture in Toronto like 6 weeks ago. And he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Here, look." And I pulled up a video on my phone of him from the lecture. I'm like, "Is this your uncle?" He's like, "Yeah, that's him." I said, "Oh, okay, good." Just like I thought. So yeah, very funny. And Tyler, am I forgetting any? Oh yeah, the last question, unless there's another one I'm forgetting.
Oh, the most important one.
The most important one. But basically at the end of the episode, each of us get to go around and mention something that we thought was particularly important. We've been talking for like an hour and 40 minutes now, and we've brushed over a lot of topics. And this actually all comes from, just to give a little background, from a high school class I was in, where my teacher made us all take a take-home point from the lesson. He said, I know the lesson has been an hour, but you can really sum this up in like one point, a few words, one idea that you really took from this. So each of us get a chance to mention that. So for me, the parts that really stuck out to me was how obvious it is when you tell the parts of your story that working together with people is the secret to not just relationships with those people and creating amazing stuff, but secretly doing stuff with people is the secret to happiness, right? Because you get community out of the deal, you can get raising money out of the deal, you can get creating amazing things out of the deal. You can honestly get like a life full of satisfaction out of the deal from purely just doing things with people who you enjoy working with, who are better than you and who are better than you at certain things. And to me, that sort of wholesome idea on this is a real take home.
Nice.
So to me, that was super important. Tyler, what for you was a big take home?
I really liked how we spoke about the different lenses in which we view the world. It was sort of the first time that I think I heard you speak about magic as a language. And that's something that really, created a big shift in my perception of it, because of the same thing happened to me with mathematics when it was first expressed as a language.
Right.
I then understood it in a much deeper, a more philosophical sight. And more than that, this is the first time I've ever heard someone say Matthew to zero. So that was really, I was taken aback by that. I'm like, Matthew? No, that's not his name.
That's
It was
not his
Matthew
name.
person.
And don't forget the capital M.
Right, of course. Yeah. So yes, David, what about you?
That's awesome. Yeah. So I'm going to go for the alliteration here, but again, communities, and connections. Look for a relevant community and look for meaningful connections in whatever you do, whether it's a card trick or whether it's you're turning the world upside down. And I don't think you can go far wrong, really. So yeah, that's I tried to keep it short, tried to keep it simple.
Community and connection. I love it. And I think that it's a good take home and potentially a title for the episode. and with that, I want to give you a big, huge thank you for joining us on the episode and sharing all of your insights and particularly, what was so exciting about this episode is all of your experiences and painting it in such a way that we're able to take from it strategies and really simply, amazing conversations and working with incredible people. So what a great take home and wrap up. And of course, a big, huge thank you to everybody at home who listened to this and joined us to listening for however long we've been talking now about things like community and working together. And, more than anything, and this is always the struggle with something passive like a podcast, but more than anything is you're probably driving your car or walking your dog or whatever, and you've listened to this and you said, wow, makes a lot of sense, like communities and do stuff with people, whatever. And then you're just going to listen to the next podcast next week and everything's going to remain exactly the same. So more than anything is to take this information and go home and call one friend or two friends and say, I listened to a podcast and I'm inspired to start a project. Anything excite you? Or I've really wanted to make a video. Want to come over on Friday and make this video with me? Like, let's just do it. Just start for the very first time. Put it together. Call because you want to do a charity thing. But find one friend, find two friends, and put this into action and start making things happen. And I think that you will be thankful with the results.
You will be surprised by wonder.
Exactly. You'll be surprised by wonder. I love that. So thank you to you, and big thank you to you, David. And we will see everybody next Thursday.
Thanks very much, guys.
Well, there you have it, episode 124 of Discourse in Magic with David Peck. A few things you should do. Number one, go and check out David Peck's podcast, Face to Face. It's been running for a very long time, and it's being updated right now, and everything is about to look beautiful. So if it doesn't look beautiful right now, give it 3 days, because they're in the process of relaunching. As well, check out what David does online, and if you haven't, go check him out on Instagram as well. While you're there, go check out at Discourse in Magic on Instagram. We're doing some fun stuff. And otherwise, thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you next Thursday.